speaker, and it's funny, we were born in the same state, Oklahoma. We're a bunch of Okies. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker from Nashville, Tennessee, Linda L. Would you please join us?
Hello, my name is Linda. I've been a member of Al-Anon since February 14th, 1987. Now, I have two disclaimers to say about that. One is I came in a brownout, and so I have no idea what was my first day in Al-Anon, so I just picked February 14th. I do know the year was 87. And I usually say that I've been a grateful member of Al-Anon since February 14th, 1987. But I'm here, and I have to be honest. Some days I haven't been grateful to be in Al-Anon. Some days I would have just preferred to stay in denial and believe I had everything under control. Okay. So with that, I would like to say hello again. And in our area, we have a moment of silence before the Serenity Prayer. And someone asked Lois Wilson, who was the co-founder of Al-Anon, what she did in the moment of silence. And she said, I invite God to the meeting. So if you'd be willing to have another moment of silence, and we'll ask your high power, the God of your understanding, to come join us. Thank you. I sometimes pray that you're all going to leave during that moment of silence, but you didn't. So I guess we're going to have to do this thing. I would like to thank the committee, Suzanne. I think I'm going to thank Darla. I guess she's the one that got me into all this 44 years ago. And the committee, Steve, Ryan, who... You know, if you were going to leave anybody at the airport, I thought it would have been an Al-Anon and not one of the AA speakers. But Ryan picked me up at the airport, Scott and I, his lovely wife, Sadie, everybody on the committee. These things don't just happen. This is a lot of organizing and a lot of, you have to work at it. Well, I'll put it this way. One time I had a sponsee, she said, how do I work on my defects of character? And I said, get on a service committee. You know, we go at it and then we just hug each other. I love that part. So thank you. The basket in the room was just overwhelming. So many good gifts. It went on and on. The decorations, just everything that goes into this. I say thank you. And I wonder, why is it my turn to tell my story? It's just a story, and what do I have to say? What I have to say is I got here because I love alcoholics. Absolutely love alcoholics. The first alcoholic I ever fell in love with was my dad. My mother and dad are incredible people. They've since passed, but they met each other in this little town of Oklahoma. My dad was an amputee. He only had one arm. When he was born in rural Oklahoma, there was a blood clot moving up his arm. They didn't know anything but to saw his arm off. So this man, they came out of the Depression, and this young couple in one generation's time turned their whole life around. He became a champion golfer, a champion skeet shooter. My mother became this wonderful woman, and they lived with the disease of alcoholism. I think their life would have been more pleasant if my mother had found Al-Anon. She was one of those women that had, you know what Venetian blinds are? Those, before you had designer blinds, you had these metal blinds. And so she had little marks on her forehead from standing in the window waiting for him to come home. And that's what she taught me, to wait. Now, I saw my dad drink But and I saw my dad drunk a lot. And he came from generations of, his dad was the meanest town drunk in this little town in Oklahoma where they lived. And I'd like to say that I thought that affected me, but it didn't. I was born, they eloped. My mother was still in high school. Then after she graduated, they moved in and started their little picket fence dream. And about a year later, I came along, and I was a disappointment to them because I was a girl. They didn't even pick out a girl's name, so I ended up being named after my dad, Linda Jean. If you got Linda Jean, you knew you got to pick out the switch. That's what that meant when they used your middle name. You were going to get into trouble some way. And I think they believed that I wasn't going to be an only child, and I was. I think they wanted a lot of children. I think my grandmother told me one time that my dad wanted a boy so the boy could be his other arm. I got all of these strange messages that I was a disappointment just because I was born. And in truth, my parents loved me very much. And there's certain advantages of being an only child. One comes to mind. All the budget for clothes gets used on me. I had all of the back seat when we went on a family holiday. And we would travel with my dad. He was a traveling salesman. And we would travel with him. And he would have to entertain company business people. And so they would play golf all day. And then they would go to the country club. And my parents would take me with them. And quite honestly, as an only child, all through my life growing up, I was just the shortest adult. I was, whatever they were doing, if they were at the cocktail party, if they were at the dinner, whatever they were doing, I was there. I can remember sitting for hours and hours and hours in a bar room where my feet just wouldn't even, come to the end of the seat. And the bartender would finally take mercy on this little girl in the bar room, and she'd bring me a jar of cherries with those cute little sword toothpicks, I can't even look at those cherry things anymore anyway. But they gave me a lot. They... but I would come home from school, and my dad's clothes would be outside the door, and I'd just step over them because I knew that he wasn't going to leave. I knew that this is the way we did our life. Now, my girlfriend, my very best friend in high school, I grew up in West Texas. If you want to know of flash notes of what my high school was like, I grew up in Odessa, Texas, which is where Under the Friday Night Lights was all of that what was about. So if you want to know how I grew up, it was Under the Friday Night Lights. And I didn't know I wanted out of that situation because it looked so good. And I'd go over to my girlfriend's house, and her dad worked the oil fields, and his 5 o'clock was actually 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I would go to pick her up for high school, and I would see her dad in the living room in his undershirt, and he had taken his teeth out, and he was picking a bottle up and drinking it. And I had a judgment. I thought, that doesn't seem right. But we would go out to the country club, and I would see people drink and act inappropriate. But I thought that was okay because the packaging around it was so attractive. So this is the family that I grew up in. They gave me a lot. I traveled with them. I got to go to Europe before I got out of high school. They gave me a convertible as a senior graduation, a little Chevy fancy car. Their dream was for me to go off to college. In Odessa, I graduated from high school in 1964. Okay, so you don't have to do any of the math. I'm 74 years old this year, okay? So just like that, okay? Don't get your calculators out. So this is my journey, loving my dad, loving my family, as alcoholics as they were. We'd get together with my dad's brothers and then just short of calling the police every time. But because we had a lot of money, it seemed like that was okay. So I didn't know I wanted out of this, it seemed like a wonderful place to grow up, and I didn't know I wanted out of it. But I stayed at home. I graduated from high school in 1964, and I started going to the junior college because my parents wanted me to go to college. And I guess this is my journey. What should I call this journey? I'm going to call this my step 0 journey. It's before I got into Al-Anon and started doing the steps. So my working on step 0 is when I started putting things in that big hole. Men, working, doing things. Or maybe the 0 was that I tried to capture you inside of that. So for the rest of this talk, before I get into Al-Anon, this is my story. This is how I lived with step 0. And I lived with step 0 because I am just so attracted to alcoholics. I can't help it. I just have this knack. In fact, I can prove that I have a knack, okay? Because my friend, my wonderful friend, said, you can really pick them out. I can just look across the room, got him, yep, oh yeah, sure, yeah, probably not. Oh yeah, that one, yeah. So my wonderful friend said, this is a real gift you have. And he gave me 500 business cards. And he said, you can use these in our community and you can help recovery in our community. And he said, like if you're at the line to pick up the dry cleaning and you look over there and you see somebody you're attracted to, you can hand them one of these cards. I go, okay. So this side of it has my name, phone number. This side of it says this. Hi, my name is Linda. I'm a member of Al-Anon. I find you attractive, so I suggest you go to the nearest treatment center and have an assessment done. It's just my talent. It's just my talent. So I'm still living at home, and I'm going to this junior college, and this guy comes across campus, and something went thumpity-thump in me, and something must have went thumpity-thump in him, and he asked me out, and we'd known each other 2 weeks, and he asked me to marry him. And I thought that seemed like a great idea. I was so attracted to him. So we went to my parents and announced that we were going to get married, and they started asking really silly things like, shouldn't he have a job first? And we go, nah, that's just details. We'll work it out. You know, and I was going to marry this man, and I know it's because I didn't want to stay in my household. I didn't know why I didn't want to stay in my household. That was one reason. The second reason was, this was in 1965, and quite honestly, I'd been a good girl for about as long as I could be. Okay. And we were engaged 6 months, and my parents gave us a lovely wedding, and I marched down the aisle in a white dress that I deserved to wear. And we are still college students, and now we're going to live happily ever after. So we started going to one campus after another campus, and he just really couldn't find himself, and we couldn't seem to find our picket fence. And so I came up with I've always had great ideas. I mean, I still have great ideas. Now, the good news is I talk them over with my sponsor first, but back then I just have a great idea. So after we'd been married for about, I guess, we got married in 65. Our first daughter was born in 1968. That was my idea. We are going to be a family because I'm going to have a baby. And so we'd gone to visit this friend's baby in the hospital that had just been born. And I said, I think we should have a baby. And he goes, well, I was thinking about buying a sailboat. Well, 9 months later, we named her Jamie, okay? I won that one. So now we're still college students, and we have this baby, and he still doesn't have a job, and we're still just trying to run with the textbooks and if it didn't work out, we would just move to another campus and kind of start all over. And I know now that he would look at me and he'd say, let's move to Dallas, and I'd say, that sounds great. Or let's move to Austin. I'd say, that sounds great. And I know it because we were always trying to outrun the disease. And I believed him because he believed it. We always thought we were moving towards something. But what I know is that when you're trying to outrun the disease, you pack it up. You pack it up with the kids' toys, you pack it up with the dishes, you pack it up with the books, and it's just there, and it's there waiting for you, and you take it with you. You can't outrun the disease. But this young man, and now I've got this husband, and I've got this baby, and we're college students, and he still doesn't have a job. Well, then one day he comes in, he grabs his guitar, he says, I'm gonna go on an audition. I go, okay. He goes and he comes back and he says, I've got a job. And he started being the entertainment in the local lounge there in the Holiday Inn. It was amazing. They wanted him to come sing so people would come to happy hour and then stay and drink longer. The music was not about making music. It was about selling alcohol. But he comes back and he's so excited because now he is making more money in 1 month than we'd seen forever. And so he's got a job. And so we're excited. But what happened was, at the end of that month, they wanted him to go to another Holiday Inn and stay there for 30 days and then go to another Holiday Inn. And this is all over Texas, but there's a lot of Holiday Inns in Texas. And he was just going to go and he was going to be on tour, but he had a job, so that sounded great. We're still college students, but that doesn't matter. He can drop out, and now he's got this job. And, well, I didn't think he should go off without adult supervision. So I packed up this baby that's a year old, the hot plate, and I started, we lived for years without an address. We just became the people that were living in Holiday Inn room to Holiday Inn room. But it was so exciting because he's got a job, and he would come home from work at night, and he would kind of, act like he'd been to a party, and he'd kind of smell like he'd been to a party. But since it was work, it must not have been a party because it was work. Now, this is what the video looked like. We're in a Holiday Inn in some small town in Texas. He's going down every night except Sunday night to make music in the bar. He'd put a band together. I'm upstairs with a toddler. I don't know anybody, and I get bored. I say, this is not working for me. So Friday, I announced to him, I'm going to be the drummer in the band. He goes, have you ever played drums before? I said, that's just details. We'll work it out. And so his bass player took me to a pawn shop on a Saturday, and for $50, I bought a whole trap set. I'm talking about 2 ride toms, a floor tom, a crash cymbal, a hi-hat, a snare drum, a bass drum. Monday night, I was the drummer in the band. You can't tell me that we're not determined people, It was amazing. I was just kind of like dancing sitting down, actually. And you just had to count 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 at that time. And now we are living happily ever after. I'm the drummer in the band. I get to go down, and I get to watch all the people having a good time. And then this is my training to try to control other people's drinking, because making music is not about making music in bars. It's about selling drinks. And what I noticed, that if we took a break, that at the end of a set, every your 15-minute break after you'd been playing for a while, that if people didn't have a full drink in front of them, they would leave. So I would tell the cocktail waitress, we're going to take a break at 15 till 9. You make sure everybody has a full drink in front of them. That way they'll stay. Then there'll be more. I've got this figured out. I figured out right away that sometimes you said hello to the wife, and then the next night sometimes you said hello to the girlfriend, and you never talked about that. I had this thing figured out. And we became very, very successful in Texas. We became known around the Dallas area, in Lufkin, Houston, just name a town. And we are traveling and living in a hotel for 30 days. Oh, did I mention that I still had my daughter? So what am I supposed to do with her? Well, I would tell the innkeeper he had to make sure we had a babysitter, and I would leave her upstairs in the room with this babysitter that I couldn't even tell you who her name was. And we became so popular that we became known as the After Hours Club, which meant if anybody that was famous was on tour in Dallas or in Houston, when they found out where we were playing, after they did their concert and after it was time to close the bars at 1 o'clock, we would lock the door and we would drink and we would make music all night long. I mean, I have played drums for some people that you would really recognize. And, oh yeah, and that baby was still upstairs in the room, and this teenage girl, this might be on a school night and should have to go home, but I was such a good mother. I would go upstairs and I would take the phone off the hook, and I'd go downstairs and I'd take the phone off the hook in the bar, and I would hang out with those guys making music and drinking tequila and singing songs and writing songs and having a party. And every now and then I'd go over and I'd see if she was awake. I'd listen on the phone. Now, don't you think Family Services would have had a little trouble with that? Yeah. Keeping her up there? Yeah. So there's 8 years between my daughters. When I became pregnant with the second daughter, I sat down behind the drums one night and sent the snare drum across the dance floor, and that is not a pregnant woman playing drums. Don't even go there. Don't even try to visualize that one. And so I kind of retired from playing the drums. Now this man, the father of my daughters, he still had this drive to be a wannabe songwriter. And like I tell you, we had moved and lived in hotels. We had moved to different places trying to outrun the disease. And finally one day he announced to me, he said, let's go to Nashville, Tennessee. And I thought, that sounds wonderful, because that's where all the songwriters are. That's where they're really making the music. And my youngest daughter, who will be 44 tomorrow, she turned a year old in Nashville. So that's how long we had lived in Nashville. And the music is what got us there. And the music is unbelievable. And music is a business there. And what I know about the disease of alcoholism, sometimes taking the drink is more important than taking care of business. And this man that I was married to, the party became more important. And he had some really good chances to be successful. And he had some really good chances to party a lot. And he had some really good chances to throw that away. And he came to me one day and he said, this isn't working for me. Pack up. We're going back to Texas. And I have to tell you, I stood in front of this man and I said, I can't. I was absolutely so worn out and so old, I could not pack up one more time. My parents had helped us buy a house, and I thought, I just can't. And he said, well, if you're not going to go, I guess we just get a divorce. And I had asked for a divorce on other occasions, but he had this logic. He said, we couldn't afford to get a divorce. I don't know what that means, but anyway, I'd found my neighbor's husband, and he offered to give us a divorce for $50. So this man packed up his music instruments, his guitars, his songs, and we paid this guy $50, and we get a divorce. And he drives back to Texas, and in the rearview mirror, he leaves a 1-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an ex-wife whose resume said drummer in the band. And the man that handled my divorce, he said, you're gonna need to make. You're a single mom. You're gonna need to make some more money. He said, my office is on the 24th floor of the downtown First American Bank Center, and there's a gentleman there that owns a commercial real estate company, and he's looking for someone to manage his office. I did not know how well my control skills could be used in management. Yep. So I went down and I interviewed for the job, and I got the job. Now, I am a single mom, and I am rocking. I am putting the money in the bank. I am making sure they've got nice clothes to wear to school. I am making sure they get to go on all the school field trips. I am a busy woman, and I look like I'm doing it all. And you know what? I have to say that was a time that I probably turned the back on my daughters more so than any other time in my life. I wanted this daughter that was now, 9, 10 years old. I wanted her to be the one to take care of the household, and I was going to be out there bringing home the money. It seemed like a really great time because I became very, very successful in commercial real estate. There weren't a lot of women in that field. There were a growth spurt in Nashville, and I'm traveling all over, and I'm really making a lot of money. Now, this man that I went to work for that started this company, he started asking me out, like on a date, and I would say, well, you're married. And he said, that's just details. We'll work it out. And he got a divorce, and we got married. And now it seems like this is the perfect picket fence. Now, this was the time in our life that I say it was the looking good and feeling bad time. Okay? Because we are making a lot of money. We're driving fancy cars. Our girls are in private school. We own a whole fleet of sailboats. We're traveling all over the world. And I couldn't understand why we're not happy. I couldn't understand it. I'd go to my doctor and I'd say, something's crazy in my household. And he'd see the address where I lived. I lived across the street from the governor. I had 6 bathrooms. What do I have to complain about? I'd go to a girlfriend and I'd say, something really, really is wrong in this house, and I can't figure out what it is. And she'd say, didn't you just get back from the 2 weeks in the British Virgin Islands? What are you complaining about? So I'd just go away, and I'd shut down, and I would work harder. And I'm the mother that sent their girls to school with a fever because perfect children don't get sick. They knew the name of all of the nurses at the clinics at school. I'm the mother that they said, could you bring a dozen cupcakes tomorrow? And I'd say I'd show up with 50. I mean, I am doing it. And it's horrible. Something was very, very wrong. Very wrong. And what I know now is what was going on is this man that I was married to, well, when you live across the street from the governor's mansion, I don't think it's polite to say drug dealer. You say entrepreneur. And he had a very successful entrepreneuring in downtown Nashville. And my oldest daughter was beginning her journey into drugs and alcohol, and my young daughter was now 8 years old, and her body became that of a woman, and I'm in early menopause. You think this was a pleasant house to be in? It was absolutely crazy-making, but it didn't look that way on the outside. It looked. We had a wine cellar that would rival restaurants. We're traveling all over the world. It just looked like it should have been perfect. But this zero, that emptiness, this step 0 was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm losing myself in this. So I decide that since it wasn't perfect, that I should take this man to marriage counseling. And I found this very famous doctor in Nashville, and we would go see this doctor when we would have a fight. And the doctor would look at me, and he'd say, you're too sensitive. And he'd look at my then husband, and he'd say, you're not sensitive enough. And we'd go away. and we'd do the routine again. And it would be wonderful, and then something terrible would happen, and we'd go back, and he'd say, you're too sensitive, you're not sensitive enough, I don't know why it's so crazy, but we're trying to really keep this together because it looks like the perfect thing. This man had adopted my daughters, so this is the perfect do-over. We've got money, we've got status, we've got a family. Why is it crazy? So to celebrate the Valentine's Day, my husband and his best friend had gone down to Miami because we were going to do a Valentine's trip down to the Lower Keys, and this best friend of my husband's, we traveled with him quite a bit, sometimes with the wife and sometimes with the girlfriend, so I just called him Honey. And this particular time, Honey was the girlfriend, and so we flew to Miami, and the guys picked us up. They'd gone down a couple of days early to kind of get ready for our vacation. You can figure that one out. And so we get in the car, and I had been working really hard. I had really done an unbelievable big deal. I mean, you tell me, you put me in a business conference room with 8 attorneys and shopping center developers, and I'm in there, and I'm going to get the deal done. And I had gotten the deal done, and I was exhausted. So they pick us up at the airport, and we start traveling down to the Lower Keys. And they're kind of doing a party all the way down, and I'm kind of over in the car, just exhausted. And we travel, and we travel, and we travel, and we haven't had anything to eat. And then finally it's dark, and we stop to eat. We're somewhere in the Lower Keys, and I know we had a really nice place to eat because there's a lot of great fish places to eat fish that are like, shacks or something. But this place was nice because there were tablecloths on the table. And I remember thinking, this is great. This is our Valentine's holiday. This is so wonderful. We're with this other couple, and we're eating. It's going to be so wonderful. And then I said something wrong. I said, pass the salt, please, or please pass the salt. And he went ballistic. And he stood up, and he said, and this is just about a quote. He said, I can't believe you. He said, I just can't believe it. He says, I'll tell you what, right over there, that's my very best friend. And let me tell you, if there was a firing squad right over there, and they told me to pick him or you, guess who's going to get shot? It's going to be you. I thought, well, there's a lot of information in that. Even that got through. And I said, okay. I stood up, and I said, I'm leaving. I'm going home. And they go, whatever. So I go over to the lady at the cash register, and I'd say, call me a cab. And, we're in the Lower Keys, and you can walk across the whole island, But she goes, okay. So she calls this cab, and this little cab driver comes, and I said, take me to the Miami airport. And I'm really upset. And he goes, well, blah, blah, blah. And he starts telling all this stuff, and I don't really know what he's saying, but I'm going, whatever. Just, take me to the airport. And so we ended up driving up in front of his house. And I'd kind of been around, but I'd never been inside a taxi driver's house. And what the deal was, that cab couldn't go, but he could take a van to the airport. So he'd gone back to park the taxi, get the van to take me to the airport. It's like, dark. It's like late at night. And I'm thinking, this is very confusing. But about that time, his wife opened the door, and she said, hey, come on in. It's going to take him a while to put some gas in the van, but he'll take you to the airport. Now, the woman that got out of that taxi to get ready to go to the airport, that was the beginning of my run. I didn't know I was running toward you. I thought I was running away from them. But this lady says, come on in, and she invited me into her home. I can see it so clearly. I stopped at the door, and I looked around. I'm going back to a house that has 6 bathrooms. It is a mansion. I stopped at this door, and I looked around, and she was like folding clothes there on the couch. And she had some soup cooking back there in the kitchen. It was just like one room, and I'm sure their bedroom was over on this side. And I just stopped, and I go, wow, this is a home. This feels good. This feels really good. And she said, you look really upset. Can I do anything to help you? And I said, yes. I said, can I buy a pair of those socks? I said, I'm going to fly back to Nashville, and there's a big snow on the ground. It was 2 inches. But I had on flip-flops, and I knew I was, because I walked out of that restaurant with nothing but my purse, my backpack. And she said, I'll just give you these socks. So see, we have these guardian angels in our lives. She gave me those socks. And she trusted me with her husband to take me to the Miami airport. She was a good businesswoman. She made me pay in cash, you know. And so now he drives me to in dark, and it takes forever, and we finally get back to the Miami airport. And this is not the way the airport is now. But back then, the airport was under construction, and it was open to the street. And he let me out at the door, and it was the middle of the night, early morning, dark, and there were no flights anywhere. I would have gone anywhere if I could have gotten a flight out, but there were no flights to be had. So my only recourse was to spend the night there in the airport, and it was a long night because it was open to the street, and quite honestly, I spent the rest of that night trying to stay out of danger. And I back up against the wall, and I'm holding my backpack, and I slide down that wall, and I said a prayer. I didn't know it was a prayer. I said, God, my life is unmanageable. Now, unmanageable didn't show up in my vocabulary. I managed about 27 shopping centers. I managed to get deals done. I managed to get my girls in private school. I managed everything. And for me to say my life is unmanageable, that was a surrender. It was a prayer, and I didn't even know it. So I get back to Nashville, and I do what my mom's taught me to do. I waited. I waited for him to come home because that's what she had taught me to do. Now, this man, he came through the door a couple of days later, and I had seen him angry, but I had never seen him that angry. He said, you embarrassed me, you walked out on me, and now it's going to get bad. Trust me, it's going to get bad. But because I was always so organized, I'm just trying to buy time, and I said, wait a minute, let's call that doctor. Every time we're going to have a fight, we go see this doctor. And he goes, oh. So I had it right there at the Rolodex by the phone, and I call, and this is a doctor you had to make appointments with like months ahead of time. I'm talking like 6 months ahead of time, but I'm just trying to buy some time. I call, and the little receptionist says, hello, can I help you? And I said, this is me, and we've got to see the doctor, and can you do anything? She goes, well, we just had a cancellation, and if you can be here in 15 minutes, the doctor can see you. Amazing. So we get in the car to drive down to see that doctor. And you know, anger is scary, but silent anger is the scariest. We know what anger sounds like. A plate up against the wall, a lamp on the floor, skin against skin. We know what anger sounds like. But that silent anger in that car was absolutely deadly. And I probably, for the whole time driving down there, I probably didn't take a deep breath. So we get in to this doctor. This is the doctor that used to fold his arms and tell me I was too sensitive, tell my husband he wasn't sensitive enough, and then we'd go away. This time we walked into this doctor's office, and he goes, oh, come in. He said, sit down. He went on his side of the desk. He said, before you start talking, he says, I have to tell you something. He said, my name is Dr. So-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic, and I need to make amends to my patients because I haven't always been as present as I should have been. So from that time to the other time we'd seen this guy, he had gotten into recovery. And he says, I know what's happening in your house. My house lived it. My house lived that false, looking good, feeling bad deal. You know, with all of the money and all of the cars and all of the boats and all of the travel. He said, it's not enough. And he said, things were really different back then. And he said, my wife and I were going to go to this couple's retreat. And he said, we can't go. Here's our registration. Here are the tickets. And I want y'all to go up there, and they will help you get your marriage together, your life together, or won't. But go. So like in 2 days now, I am on an airplane to South Dakota. You know, this is moving pretty fast, folks. Now, we go to this retreat. They picked up. Oh, and I should tell you, an airplane was always one of my then-husband's favorite bar. So you can imagine how we arrive at this retreat center. And we go there, and I walk into a room. It was kind of a room like this, maybe not quite so big. But they had those, those shades that have the steps and the traditions hanging on the wall. And just to pass time, I walk over, and I'm kind of looking at them. And I go, number one, unmanageable. Isn't that weird? I just used that word just the other day, unmanageable. But I manage. How can that be? So here we are at this week-long couples retreat up in South Dakota. And it was a beautiful place. They had a lake. They had a little path that you could walk around and see all of the steps. And all these couples were there, and they would hold hands and go into dinner. They'd hold hands, and it looked like Noah's Ark, okay? Twoses everywhere. Twoses here, twoses there. So every time it was our turn to do our work with the staff, they would take my husband into this other room. And I'm left out there, stomping my feet, looking around like, what's the deal? And what I know now is that this recovery thing that we're in, it's not about saving relationships, it's about saving lives. And they had him in that other room trying to break down his wall of denial and for him to recognize all the drugs and alcohol use that he was into. Somehow we get through the week. I learned the Serenity Prayer. The guy that said goodbye and gave me the hug, now I'm flying back to Nashville, and when he gave me the hug in leaving, he said, get yourself to Al-Anon. Now, we're in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I thought, Al-Anon, is that an Indian word? I didn't have a clue. So we get back to Nashville. And I have to tell you, I could stay at my desk in my office and I could manage well. I could keep 2 secretaries busy all day. I could do big deals. But the weekends were long at my house. And now I have a little bit of information without any tools. And we'd had a really rough weekend. It's Monday, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I start crying. Now, this woman doesn't cry. She wears business suits and silk dresses, and she gets it done. She doesn't cry. And I am crying and crying and crying. I thought, I don't know what to do. Then that word Al-Anon popped up, and then I don't know. God directed. I look in the phone book. There was the number. I call, and I have to say thank you. Thank you to everyone that answers phones in intergroup office and at central office of AA and Al-Anon. You're changing lives, you're saving lives. And I called this woman, and I said, I don't know what's going on, blah, 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 blah. And she said, I've been on the other end of that phone since then, so I know what it's like. Well, I know what I sounded like to her, blah, 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 blah. And she said, where are you? And I told her we owned our office building that we were in downtown Nashville. And she said, well, isn't this amazing? It's Monday, and there was a noon meeting at the Methodist Publishing House, which was in walking distance from my office. And she said, I want you to go over there to that meeting. They will give you some literature. They'll take care of you. They'll answer questions. She said, just go to that meeting at noon. Oh, okay. So, then noon came around, and I'd kind of gotten it all back together, I got this. But I told that woman I'd go to that meeting. Oh, I'll just go over there. They just probably want me to donate money, and so I'll just go on over there, So I go to my first Al-Anon meeting, and I'm standing outside the door, and I heard something that I hadn't heard in a long time. It was laughter. And I said, "What is that noise?" And you said, "Come on in." And these women embraced me, and they let me stay. They let me stay. And they let me do what I did, and that was sing hymns. Didn't they sing hymns in your meeting? Him did this, and him did that. Yep, you let me stay. And I took to Al-Anon, and it took to me, and then it became a way of life, a lifesaver. But it wasn't something that would save that marriage. That marriage was a business deal. It was made out of unhealthiness, and it continued to be unhealthy. And I just had to get out of that marriage. But I had recovery. It took 2 years for that divorce to be final, because it was a business deal too, and then we get a divorce, and now I've got Al-Anon, and I want to tell you that 80 years of celebrating the Big Book. Back then, I was taken through the steps by my sponsor using the Big Book. She was what she called a Big Book thumper. I believe in the Big Book. It saved my life over and over and over again. And quite honestly, back then, we didn't have a lot of literature. And what a lot of AA people don't know is that Al-Anon's got this crazy thing that the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is not conference-approved literature. It's been a controversy going on then and going on now. But let me tell you, I love the Big Book. In fact, I still have the first one I bought that I'd underline in red everything I thought he should read. Oh, yeah. So I'm in recovery, and I'm single, and I've got this wonderful house. It had a apartment upstairs, it had a cottage, it had downstairs, and this is an exciting part of my life in recovery. My oldest daughter had gone off to college, my youngest daughter was still there, and I had a pickup truck, and I was encouraged to go to open AA meetings, never to talk, but to hear the stories of hope and to hear the stories of recovery. So I had met a lot of women, especially one, because we always looked down at the floor and we always had on shoes alike. And so I had a pickup truck, and this was a time that I had a lot of room in my house, and my pickup truck has moved a lot of women with plastic bags into that house and their kids. This was an exciting time for me. One time I had a baby crib in my office. I mean, this was a wonderful time with these women. It was kind of like a safe place. And we would cook meals, and we'd get all dressed up and say, "Where are we going to go?" Oh, we'd just go to a meeting. It was just a wonderful time. And we had a lot of cookouts. We had a lot of fun times. And it just seemed like we really were living happily ever after. My daughter had gone off to college. She turned 21, and she joined AA, or she became a member of AA when she says, "Mom, I'm old enough to drink now, so I think I'll stop." Okay. And my youngest daughter was in Alateen, and these women are there. It was just a wonderful, healthy time. And I had, I had all these women, all these children. I had a dog, a cat, a gerbil, a rabbit, a fish, and a guinea pig. And I announced to my girlfriend one day, "I'm lonely." And she says, "How can that be?" Well, but I had a yearning. I had a yearning to celebrate my life with another person, and she said, "Well," she said, "and I'll use some names. I think it would be appropriate, with your permission." I said, we were always talking about the guys in the meetings, and we'd go to the AA dances and check out all the guys, and they were really good dancers, even though they weren't drinking. It was amazing. And so she said, well, what about Scott? I said, Scott? I've seen him in the meeting since I've been going to that open AA meeting. And all of this time, I was still going to my Al-Anon meeting. I was very active I helped start our intergroup office. I worked with a sponsor. I sponsored women. I had this halfway house for women. I'm very active in my Al-Anon. But I've been going to this AA meeting since 87 with my recovery. And she said, well, what about Scott? And I said, Scott, I didn't even know. What do you mean about Scott? And she goes, well, he's about to get a divorce. And I said, he's about to get a divorce? I didn't even know he's having any trouble. He always looked so happy and laughing and, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going like, wow, that's pretty good information I've got now. So evidently, I started doing something different. I don't know what it was, but I'm going to that meeting, and one day I'm leaving that meeting. It was on Saturday and Sunday morning. I'd go both. And one time I'm leaving that meeting, and Scott stood right in front of me, and he goes, can I ask you something? And I go, yeah. And he says, have I done something to offend you? And I go, well, no. Why do you even ask that? And he said, he said, you don't have eye contact with me. You don't go to lunch with us anymore. You don't stand around and chat and talk. You don't get hugs from anybody. And he said, I was just wondering if I'd done something to offend you, and that's why you didn't hang around. And I go, well, I have to tell you, I found out that you're going to be single, and I'm interested. And then I bolted for my pickup truck. And we didn't have phones. I had to wait till I got home to call my sponsor. And I said, he said this, and I said that. And she said, well, it might work out okay because you told the truth. So when Scott got his divorce, he asked me out. And then he asked me out again, and then he asked me out again. And then we did the dating, go for coffee and go to a meeting, go for coffee. It was wonderful. And we'd been dating and hanging out in recovery for about 2 years. And he asked me one day, he said, I've heard you say many, many times that you'll never get married again. Because I have to tell you, marriage hadn't shown me a lot. And I did say that. He said, but I'd like for you to be my wife. And I'm going, okay. I didn't pray about it. I didn't call my sponsor. I just said, okay. And then we got married. We got married at the Bluebird Cafe, and our friends say it was one of the best meetings they'd ever been to. Our kids sang and they read things, and we did the Serenity Prayer. I mean, it was beautiful. And now I'm married and I've got recovery. My girls are on their own journey. His kids are on their own journey. And this is really, really exciting times. And this was in 92 when we got married. And we were just invited to go speak and to travel together. And I am so grateful to Al-Anon Recovery, because I've been able to go share my story in a lot of the states in the United States. I've been able to go to Russia, the Ukraine, Australia. I mean, I'm telling you, I am so blessed to be able to come tell this raggedy story. But it was the story of recovery. It was the story of hope. It was the story of working the steps, of having a sponsor, of sponsoring women, of starting retreats and roundups. And but we'd been married for several years, and I have to tell you, some dark things started happening, things I didn't understand. And in truth, I was in a horrible, horrible Al-Anon slip. I really thought I could work my program good enough, hard enough, long enough, high enough, deep enough that it was going to change other people's behavior. I wasn't working my program for myself. I was working it to change you. I thought if I just did Al-Anon, high jumped higher, then things would be different. And in truth, what was happening during this time, some inappropriate behavior was going on within my marriage, and it was some dark times without my even knowing what. And then due to some circumstances, I was a young woman kind of shared with me what was actually going on, and it was devastating. It was devastating that some things that happened outside our marriage that were in our agreement would never happen. And so we stayed together for another couple of years after what I call disclosure, but it still just wasn't meant to be. And quite honestly, Scott and I divorced, and he had to go off and fight some of his demons or whatever he needed to do, and I had to go off and I had to find forgiveness. I didn't know about forgiveness, true forgiveness. And so this is a time that we were apart for several years, and I did what I recommend all Al-Anons to do. I opened up a bar and restaurant. I'm telling you, I bet you have never seen a bouncer settle an argument in a bar by making two redneck men do rock, paper, scissors. I did it. Now, one time I did step between two women that were arguing, and I thought, I'm going to die. But I learned a lot about myself and about alcoholism and about alcohol, and I learned a lot about lives and about myself. And I couldn't understand why Scott still haunted me. I prayed, God, I'm supposed to get on with my life. I tried to date, do some other situations. I tried everything, but he wouldn't get out of my head. And we had very little contact during that time, but every time we would, it was just so painful. It was just so painful because we had had so much, and then it was so gone, but yet it wasn't. And I'd pray. I said, God, if I'm not supposed to be around this man, why do I still think about him? And I did all of the things. I worked with sponsors. I burned his name in the fire. I stomped on his name. I prayed him away. I stuck pins in a pillow, whatever. I'm just trying to get over this. And then God said, maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe there's something there. And so some of y'all may know a speaker named Sandy Beach, and he passed away. And they were having his memorial in Florida. And I have a lot of property in Florida, and I knew Scott was going to be in Florida for that memorial. And so I called him and I said, how about if we just meet? We won't be around the people we know. We won't be around family. But why don't we just meet and just see what's going on? Let's just see. And so he was there for the memorial. I flew in. He picked me up at the airport, and we went to this to my house that I own there. I own a lot of vacation houses, and I'd gone there to kind of get it ready for the season, kind of fluff it up. And I have to tell you, this is in Orlando, and we walked through the doors, and it was steamy. It was steamy, At 76 and 74 can be steamy. It's just in slow motion, okay? And so here we are back together, and it's just wonderful. It's magical. And so I said, I'm only going to be here in Orlando, and then I'm going to go down to the house in Key West, which is another house I owned. I'm getting it ready for vacation. I said, well, would you like to go down there? And he goes, yeah, I've got to go back to Nashville and take care of some things, but I'll come down there for a couple of weeks. Well, this is where God just really takes care of things. He came down there to Key West to stay a couple of weeks, and about the fourth day, he fell down the stairs and broke his foot and had to stay for 6 weeks. And it was the perfect Al-Anon thing. I could sit him in a chair, and I could put the crutches on the other side of the room. And he had to listen to me. And he's like one of those bobble things, But and this is how we got back together. And this is well, we're just recycled. What can I say? And it's a wonderful thing. And it only happens because we both had a belief in recovery, in ourselves, in a higher power, in not keeping secrets. And that's the way we're doing it now. And this is the magic. This is the magic we have in these steps and traditions that were read. And I want to just share a little bit about that. This is what I believe. I don't know why I sat over there so absolutely terrified of you when you are the very ones that have saved my life, that you're the very ones that have given me a life. And I look down at these steps and it says, number one, we. Does that mean that we're in first place? Does that mean you are participating in your recovery by being here? Absolutely. You know? And then it says things like restored. We're restored to sanity. What I know about restore is nothing gets restored unless it has worth and value. Think about it. One of those wonderful masterpiece paintings. Sometimes they have to restore it with little tiny brushes, or you get an antique piece of furniture, and sometimes you got to put some pretty harsh, chemicals on it and scrub it up. But nothing gets restored unless it has worth and value. You have worth and value. That's why we're here. I kind of came into Al-Anon with a God because I lived outside. I grew up in West Texas and I stayed outside a lot. So my God was the wide open spaces, which didn't mean it was especially a God that was very special. But look at this, we get a higher power. Then in step 5 it says God, and then over in our traditions they put an adjective in front of it and say loving God. Isn't this our journey toward this wonderful loving God? This higher power, this HP, but my disease is one that I have amnesia, and I forget that I have a higher power. Now, to help me remember, there was this commercial for V8 juice. Remember, people are having very busy lives, and they go, I could have had a V8. Remember that commercial? I'm doing a very busy life, and I'm going, could have had an HP, So this is a walking around deal that we do. This happens when you're beside someone at the red light. This happens when you're standing in line at the grocery store. This happens in these rooms. I like this word, recovery, rejuvenate. What is that word? Well, whatever. Thank you. Everything. Re-up. And it allows us to seek our defects of character. I know all of those. If you want to know what they are, we just have to look in this index book of the ODAP book, and it starts out A, anger, B, blame, C, all of them. I mean, these defects of character, I hear them, I tell them, line up, I'll talk to you one at a time. And what you've told me is being human is not a defect of character. That's what we are. We're just humans walking along side by side. I'd like to say that about making amends, not anybody's favorite thing. People have asked me over and over again, I work with a lot of women, and they said, how did you learn forgiveness? Which was part of the amends to myself. How did you learn forgiveness? And it's like, I had to choose to stay in the pain, or I could choose forgiveness. I had to work with myself to make amends, to say, I had done everything that I could, and I have to continue to do everything I can. This amends was very, very important to me. When I was going through my steps for the first time, I had made amends with my sponsor to all of these people, and there was a woman in one of my Al-Anon meetings, and I had gossiped about her. She had said something about infidelity, and I certainly wasn't ready to hear it then. And so when they divide up, I'd say, let's don't go in that room with that woman. Let's go in this other room. My little clan, would go over here. And I knew that I needed to make amends to this woman, but I didn't see her anymore. I didn't know her name. But I wanted to do this amends thing right. I lived in Green Hills. I had a wonderful back deck. For some reason, one morning, I'm sitting on my front porch with this very Al-Anon book, and I'm looking down, and I'm going, God, I really think I'm supposed to be doing these steps, and I really think I'm supposed to be making amends, but I can't find this woman, and I don't know what to do. And I look up, and this woman is walking down my little street. And here's the video. She's got on a very nice jogging outfit. I've got on my gown. I come out my hair. It's you, you know. She kind of backs up, and my sponsor was very direct with me. She says, you're not going to have to make amends on the way you made amends. I'd always thought that volume was the voice of reason, you know, if I just got louder. But so I had only a few things I could say when I made amends. But so she said, you know, so I said these to this woman. I've been trying to find you. I was unkind about you. I said things about you, and I'm sorry, and I'm making amends. And she's looking around kind of confused, and she said, okay. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, well, I walk every morning, but I've never walked down this little street before. You know, so God wants us to make these amends. So as complete as that is, several years later, when I was going through making amends, it dawned on me that I felt uncomfortable because there were times that I needed to make good amends. I needed to make amends to that high school teacher that got me off of the back row and got me active in forensics. I need to make amends to that lady that gave me those socks. And my amends were, thank you. Thank you for being a kind and gentle person to me. A lady gave me a job when I didn't even believe I could. She just said, show up. So I tracked these people down with the same dedication that I did my other amends, and I just said, thank you. Thank you for being one of those guardian angels to me. I believe that the thing about making amends is we don't really like them. So I was given a set of questions, three by an Al-Anon person and two by an AA person. And I want to share if you do an inventory of some action that you're about to take, maybe you won't have to make the amends later. So the questions you need to ask was, did the person ask for my help? Then the next one is it necessary? Meaning, is there a time limit on it? Or is this a one-time thing or a 100 thing? And the next thing is, did they say thank you after the action? Those are good things if you're getting ready to do something, to do a little checklist on that. And then this wonderful AA member gave me two more. He says, I always ask, can I afford it? And he says, I don't mean financially, I mean spiritually. Can I afford it? And he says, and also I ask, will it harm anyone? So if I do my actions within those, and I have to tell you, I had to drag these out last night. This disease is after my family again. I just get so tired of arm wrestling this disease. I'm watching my daughter step off that cliff one more time into that abyss of inappropriate behavior, and I have to ask for you to be my penguins. You know, a penguin, when a penguin is not feeling well, if a penguin falls over, it can't get back up. So when a penguin's not feeling well, the other penguins come in very, very close. So which way it topples, it won't be able to fall over. And I have to ask you to be my penguins. I mean, I just get so angry at this disease. You know, and the bottom line is we are living with a disease that is so powerful that it kills people that don't even have it. And so our medicine is being right here and sharing these stories together. Our medicine is being open-hearted and honest. My medicine is watching your high power work in your life when I think it's abandoned me. And I thank you for that. I stay connected to my higher power by doing meditation. Now, I used to have to do meditation, like get the candle, get the music, get the chair. I'd spend so much time getting ready for meditation, I wouldn't have time for meditation, okay? So I had to give myself walking around meditation. I'm just going to hand you that one really fast. And what you do is you get a container above your head. Mine happens to be a terracotta clay pot. And yours can be a crystal bowl, a cardboard box. It can be whatever you want it to be. And you just go around collecting good things, like this weekend. Let's put that up there. The smell of a puppy. Let's put that up there. The giggle of a grandchild. Let's put that up there. The rain coming across dry West Texas. Let's put that up there. And so now I've got all of this good stuff that's in my container. And I haven't had time for meditation that morning, but I do have time to just rush into the grocery store and get 1 gallon of milk, because I'm a busy woman, and then I'm going to get home and start dinner, and I'm in the 15 items or less line, and the lady in front of me has 23 items. I've counted them. And I'm standing there, and I'm going, well, I guess God thought that I had time for meditation. I stand there in the middle of the grocery store. I take a deep breath. I dip over this terracotta clay pot, and now all of this good stuff is just coming down me like a wonderful golden goo down the side of a candle. And I'm different. I'm a different person because I stopped and I had a connect with my higher power. And now, this is a true story, now the woman is trying to write an out-of-town check. I mean, what's with this woman? But I can say, it looks like you're a visitor. Have a safe trip. So it can be changed in a moment. It can be that we are stronger than this disease because we are a we. I guess the hardest lesson for me to learn is that there's no limit to how happy God wants me to be. I try to limit that all the time. And the other thing that I try to limit all the time is that I forget that you've taught me that I have choices. I always would get backed into the corner, and I think I did not have choices. And because I thought I didn't have choices, I would react inappropriately. And what I know now is that you have given me the grace of choice. And I also know that I forget that. That's what you've taught me. So I just want to say thank you for letting me share, and I want to close with this last story. And it's about a woman that was very wise, long time ago in this village. She was very wise and wonderful. And there was a young woman in this village, and this young woman was jealous of this old woman, this old sage. And the young woman says, I'm going to trick her. I'm really going to trick her. So what the young woman did, she said she went and she got a baby bird. And she was going to go to the old woman, and she was going to put the baby bird behind her back. And she was going to say, okay, old lady, you're so all-knowing. Is this bird dead or alive? And if the old woman said, well, that bird is alive, well, the girl was going to squash the baby bird and show her the dead bird. Or if she said, well, that bird is dead, she was just going to show her the live bird. I mean, there's no way that this can be wrong. So the young woman catches the baby bird, calls everybody around to see this. And then she asked the old lady, she said, you're so all-knowing. You tell me whether or not this baby bird is dead or alive. Without hesitation, the old woman said, the choice is yours. Thank you for choosing to be with me today. I love you. God bless.